deep into the earth. Dust clung to her skin where sweat had dried. The rope bit hard into her ankles, pulled so tight it lifted her hips just off the ground. And Evan Cutter had both hands under her upper thighs. He was 49, broad-shouldered, weather-cut, the kind of rancher folks trusted without asking why. But right now, trust would have died fast, because his palms were braced against her inner legs, lifting just enough to see where the damage was, and his eyes were locked on the injury, high on her inner thigh, where blood had darkened the dust. From a distance, it looked wrong. Up close, it was worse. The wound sat high on her inner leg, raw and swollen, where rope and gravel had rubbed until flesh gave way. Every time Evan shifted her weight to ease the pull on her ankles, her body jerked in pain. Her breath came sharp and fast, shoulders trembling, teeth clenched like she refused to give the desert the sound of her suffering. She was big, bigger than most men Evan knew, built for mountains, not mercy. But right now she was pinned low, forced open, displayed in a way meant to break something inside her long before it broke the body. Evan leaned closer, jaw tight, eyes narrowed, trying to judge how deep the rope had cut. If he lifted her leg wrong, he could tear her open even worse. If he didn't lift it at all, the rope would keep sawing every time she breathed. He adjusted his grip, careful but firm, and that was when her voice finally came apart. "Don't. It still hurts there," she said. The words weren't loud. They didn't need to be. They hit him like a hand to the chest. Evan froze, not because she begged, but because she wasn't begging him to stop helping. She was begging him not to touch the place where pain had already stolen enough from her. Her legs shook beneath his hands, not weakness. Control, barely held. For one suspended moment, everything balanced on what he did next. The wrong move would turn him into exactly what the world expected a man to be. When a woman was tied down and alone, the valley lay silent around them. Stretched along the San Pedro River, July heat pressing down like a judgment, a distant windmill squealed once, then went quiet, and the taste of old coffee sat bitter in his mouth. The grass hissed softly in the wind. A hawk circled high, patient. Evan slowly eased his hands away, not fast, not dramatic, like a man unloading a gun. He didn't want to fire. He shifted back onto his heels and forced space between them, the kind of space that says, "I see you," the kind that says, "I won't decide for you." The girl dragged in a breath and held it, as if she didn't trust relief yet. Her eyes stayed wide, dark, sharp, watching him like an animal that had learned what hands could do. Evan glanced at her wrists then, and his stomach tightened. They weren't bound. Whoever had done this wanted her arms free, wanted her to be able to reach, wanted her to feel every choice. That was when Evan looked at the stakes again, not just at the rope, but at the wood itself. They weren't crooked branches, they weren't hurried. They were straight posts, cut clean, driven deep, spaced even. Fence posts, the kind a man set when he wanted something seen, something marked. This wasn't panic. This was intention. Evan reached slowly for his belt, and her entire body tensed hard, like a bow pulled to its limit, for a heartbeat. The desert held its breath. Then he pulled free his knife. He turned it in his hand once, and laid it on the ground beside her, handle toward her fingers, close enough to reach, far enough that she had to choose to take it. He set his canteen down next to it, then a clean folded cloth. He didn't speak. Words had weight here, and she'd already been crushed by enough of them. Evan stood and turned his back to her, facing the empty shimmer of heat rolling off the plain. He angled his body so his shadow fell across her, cutting the sun from her eyes. Behind him, the rope creaked softly as she shifted. He heard metal scrape dirt. He heard a low grunt that never turned into a cry. Evan did not turn around. The first rope gave way with a dry snap. The second took longer. Her breathing stayed controlled. Each cut measured like she was carving herself out of the ground, inch by inch. When her ankles finally came free, her body dropped. Not collapsing, but surrendering the strain it had been forced to hold. Silence followed. Not a threatening silence, a different one, the kind that settles after something terrible is ended. But before anyone knows what comes next, Evan heard the canteen open. The first swallows were harsh and angry, then slower, steadier. At last, a deliberate cough. That was his signal. He turned. The Apache girl sat upright against the scorched grass, spine straight despite the pain, cloth pressed high on her inner thigh. Her face was pale under the dust, but her eyes were clear now. Alert. Unbroken. Evan met her gaze and gave a single nod. No apology, no claim. Only then did he realize the truth settling heavy in his chest. If someone planted her here like this, in a place a rider was bound to pass, then this wasn't just about her suffering. It was a message, and whoever planted that message did not have to be Apache. In this territory, cruelty wore many faces, and money taught men new sins. Whoever did this wore a white man's cruelty, not Apache. And whoever sent it hadn't finished speaking yet. He heard it then, not loud, but wrong. A faint clink out in the grass, like a bit hitting stone. Evan held still, eyes on the horizon, but his hand drifted near his belt by instinct. Somewhere close, a horse shifted its weight. Not his horse, a hidden rider. Watching the scene play out, Kaya heard it too. Her head turned a fraction, and her eyes narrowed like she was counting breaths in the brush. Evan understood in that moment why her wrists had been left free. This was not only meant to hurt her, it was meant to test the man who found her. To see if he would cross a line when nobody was looking, Evan backed toward his horse without turning fully, and he kept his voice low. "We leave now," he said. Kaya did not answer. She just tightened her grip on the reins, and they moved. If this wasn't meant to punish her, then who was she really left here for? And what would happen to the man who chose not to look away? He didn't ask her name, not then. Names have weight. And weight was the last thing she needed on her chest. Evan Cutter led his horse closer, slow enough that even the flies didn't scatter. He kept his eyes level, not on the wound, not on her body, but on her face, so she could see exactly where his attention was. She watched him like a hawk watches a snake, calm on the outside, ready underneath. "You can ride if you want," he said. His voice was low, steady, the kind men use when they don't want to scare a spooked animal. "If you don't, we'll sit right here till the sun moves." She tested her legs. One knee dipped. Her jaw tightened. No sound came out. Evan didn't rush. Men rush when they're trying to feel useful. He waited, hands loose at his sides. After a long breath, she placed her palm on his forearm. Not a plea, not a grab, just a measured decision. She was heavier than she looked. Solid as a fence post, and Evan felt it in his bones. This wasn't someone the desert had made weak. This was someone the desert had tried and failed to finish. They moved slow. Step. Pause. Another step. When she was finally in the saddle, Evan handed her the reins first. That wasn't politeness. That was respect. They rode east, away from the post, away from the message planted in the dirt. Evan didn't look back. He already knew those stakes weren't meant to be forgotten. The ride took longer than it should have, not because of distance, but because pain doesn't move on a clock. The girl sat straight despite it, shoulders squared, eyes forward. She didn't slump, didn't lean into him, didn't ask for help she hadn't decided to accept. They reached his ranch just as the light softened. The worst of the heat easing its grip, a low place near Benson, tucked where the wind broke against a rise of rock. Nothing fancy. Small house, a corral, a pump that complained every time it worked. Evan helped her down, careful, all business. She stood on her own once her boots hit the dirt. That mattered to her. He could tell. Inside, the house smelled of old wood and coffee grounds. The windmill out back creaked on its lazy turns, and the coffee was black and bitter, the way old men liked it when they had too much to think about. The kind of place time moved through slow and honest. Evan set a skillet on the stove and cracked an egg with one hand, trying to make the morning look normal. It was not normal. Kaya's eyes never stopped measuring the room. She kept her boots on, even inside, like she expected to run without warning. When Evan reached for a coil of rope on a nail by the door, her shoulders jumped hard, not fear like a child, a reflex like a fighter. Evan quietly took the rope down and set it outside, far from the house, like he was moving a rattlesnake with a shovel. He did not mention it. He just poured coffee into 2 tin cups and slid one toward her. She did not drink it, but she wrapped her hands around the cup for warmth, and for the first time, Evan saw her fingers stop shaking. Evan set water on the table, then stepped back like he'd done outside. She drank, not fast now. Measured. "You got a place you want to be?" he asked. "No one's chasing us yet." She shook her head once. That was enough. That first night. She didn't lie down. She sat against the wall, knees drawn just enough to guard herself, eyes never fully closing. Evan noticed. He said nothing. He slept light, too. Old habit. Old mistakes. In the morning, he brought her clean water and a bit of bread. She ate slow, watching him the whole time. On the second day, he saw her flinch when the wind rattled a loose rope by the corral. Just a twitch, but it told him more than words would have. He noticed other things, too. The way she checked the horizon without turning her head, the way her hands rested, ready, even when she was still, and the way she touched the small piece of stitched leather hidden beneath her shirt when she thought he wasn't looking. Evan didn't ask about it. Men who ask too early don't get told the truth. That afternoon, he found tracks along the far fence, fresh, shod, not drifting, placed. Someone had come close enough to look, close enough to know she was alive. That night, she spoke for the first time. "They didn't leave me there to die," she said. Her voice was deep, steady, worn in a way young voices shouldn't be. "They left me to be found." Evan leaned back in his chair, listening. "They wanted a man," she went on, "a man who would stop, a man who would choose." She didn't say more. She didn't have to. Evan thought of the posts again. Straight, measured, set where a rider would pass. He thought of the way her wrists had been left free, the way pain had been made part of the choice. "Someone wanted to see what kind of man you were," he said. Her eyes met his. "Or what kind you would become." They sat with that for a while. The fire popped once. The house settled. Outside, a horse snorted. Not his. Evan stood, calm but ready. He looked out through the window, scanning the dark. No rider came into view. Not yet. Whoever was behind this wasn't finished. They were patient, and patient men were dangerous. Evan sat back down, slower this time. He poured a little more water into her cup. "You're safe here tonight," he said. "Tomorrow we'll see what kind of trouble followed you home." She nodded, not grateful, certain. Before the fire burned low, she finally said her name, just one word. Soft, like it was still deciding whether to stay. "Kaya." Evan repeated it once, then let it rest. Evan almost asked where she was from. Almost asked who did it, but he had learned something over the years. If you press a wounded person for a story, you are not helping, you are collecting. So he asked the only question that mattered. "Do you want the door barred tonight?" Kaya looked at the lock, then at the window, then back at him. She gave one slow nod. Evan slid the bolt into place, and the sound was small, but it changed the air in the room. Outside, the wind picked up and carried a faint sound across the yard. Leather creaking, a saddle shifting, then nothing. Kaya's eyes lifted, and Evan knew. Whoever was out there had not gone far, and if that sound in the yard made your skin tighten, you already understand why this is not over. Now, friend, if you're still here, that tells me something. If this story's keeping you company, consider subscribing so I know to keep the fire lit. Nothing loud, nothing fancy, just a quiet click. And while you listen, pour yourself some tea, take a breath, and let me know in the comments what time it is where you are and where you're listening from. We've got a long road ahead, and the next visitor to this ranch won't be coming in peace. Morning came thin and pale, the kind that makes you feel watched even when nothing moves. Evan was already up, sitting at the small table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold. He had slept light, like a man who knows the past has learned his address. Kaya stirred just after dawn. She rose slow, testing herself the way a working animal does, careful not to show pain. The cloth on her inner thigh was darkened again, but not soaked. That was a good sign, not a safe one, just good. Evan noticed she kept her back to the wall while she moved. People do that when they expect trouble to come through the door. He handed her fresh water. She nodded once and drank. Neither of them talked about the tracks he'd found. Silence can be a kind of agreement. Outside, the ranch woke up the way it always did. A horse shifting weight, wood popping as the air warmed, a crow calling from the fence line like it knew something. Evan stepped out to check the perimeter. The tracks were still there, pressed clean into the dirt. Shod hooves. 2 riders. They had not crossed the fence. They had come close enough to see the house, close enough to know she was alive. That was not good. Back inside, Kaya watched him read the ground from the doorway. She did not ask what he saw. She already knew. And that little stitched pouch under her shirt, it had more than fear in it. It had ink, names, and a mark that did not belong to her people. By midday, the heat came down hard, the kind that drains patience from a man. Evan fixed a loose board on the corral, slow and steady, more to keep his hands busy than because it needed fixing. That was when the riders showed themselves. They stopped just beyond the fence. 2 men on horses that were too clean for honest work, one tall and narrow, the other broader. With a relaxed seat that came from knowing he did not have to hurry, Evan recognized the type before he recognized the face. The taller man stayed back. The broader one rode forward alone, stopping short of the fence like he was respecting a rule he did not believe in. He smiled easy. "Afternoon," the man said. His voice carried the calm of someone who expected to be obeyed. Evan did not answer right away. He rested one hand on the fence rail and waited. "We're looking for a woman," the man continued. "Big girl, hurt leg, belongs with us." Evan felt Kaya behind him, close enough to hear everything. "She does not belong to anyone," Evan said. The man smiled wider, like he had expected that answer. "That is where folks get confused." He reached into his coat and pulled out folded papers. Not a badge, not a warrant, just papers. "Missing property," he said. "Signed in tombstone." Proper enough for men who understand how things work. Evan took a step closer to the fence. He did not take the papers. "What is your name?" Evan asked. The man hesitated just a beat too long. "Harlan Voss." That told Evan everything he needed to know. Voss was a man who worked the space between law and violence, the kind hired when someone wanted their hands clean and their conscience quiet. Behind Evan, Kaya moved. She stepped into view, not hiding, not defiant, just present. Voss looked at her and his eyes flicked down, quick and practiced, to the bandaged leg, then back to her face. "You should not have run," he said to her. His tone was mild, almost kind. Evan felt something tighten in his chest. "She is hurt," Evan said. "She is staying until she can walk." Voss shrugged. "That is not your call." One of the horses snorted. The other man shifted in his saddle. Voss leaned forward slightly. "You got a reputation, Cutter," he said. "Quiet man. Fair. Folks like that." Evan did not like the way his name sounded in Voss's mouth. "Hand her over now," Voss went on, "and this ends clean. Wait too long, and it gets complicated." That was when the taller man moved. He swung down from his horse and stepped forward, crossing the fence line like it was nothing. His hand went out toward Kaya, fast and careless. Evan did not think. He moved. His fist landed hard and low. A short punch that dropped the man before he knew what had happened. No flourish. No warning. The second man came up swearing. Evan met him halfway. A shove. A knee. The sound of breath leaving a body. It was over quick, the way real fights are. Voss never drew his gun. He just watched, eyes sharp, measuring. Evan stood between him and Kaya, breathing steady. Voss shook his head slowly. "That was a mistake," he said. "Now you made this personal." He turned his horse and rode off, leaving his men scrambling to follow. The dust